Still on data ethics, let me give us another practical scenario I also encountered. No, in the course of preparing this course, that was some weeks back, we had an event in my organization, and that event is called an induction program. So that induction program was for a batch of trainees that were that was recently coming in for our program. Usually, what we do is this: when we have training batches, we go into the class, take some pictures, put it up on social media, put it in a newsletter, and we don't we didn't think it necessary to always take permission. After all, you're my students. We have you have paid the fee, so we are just trying to market the classes and to show the social media what is actually going on. And sometimes you discover interviews, you pick them out, give them the mics, can you speak about the class? But as time went on, I realized that data privacy is being breached. And every country now, they are trying to revise their data regulation laws to be in line with proper regulatory frameworks. Nigeria recently released an updated version which stated that before you capture anyone in public, consent must be sought. What do we now do? As our students were coming in, we printed if a document and called it an induction pledge. You know what I mean by pledge? I pledge to do this as a student of this. I pledge to uphold right standards. We inserted few lines into that pledge document. What was one of the lines? I pledge to allow myself to be captured, to be used for advertorial. I pledge to allow myself to be granted interviews, and we filled all of that in the form. Finally, they were to append their signature to it. Why do we do it? So that when we have eventually gotten all our interviews and all of that, we won't have issues of people suing us to court. Now, in the 21st century, and for what we are seeing, data privacy and data collection very is a very, very important part which we must take note of. Data gathered, we must always seek consent. We must always seek consent. Ethically, we must always seek consent once we are about to gather data from people, particularly if personal information will be involved. Consent must be sought. If you now create a survey form and you're calling the survey form to analyze probably the perception of humans to this and to that, you must have a line where people actually tick I consent or I don't consent to fill the survey form. Data processing. Data processing in fact, data processing acts on its own. In the world of today, there's a lot of searchlights going on. Remember, let me relate data processing and data sharing. I want to be more practical. You would agree with me, those of us that use WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, that is all the products that has to do with Meta. If you have experienced this, you are chatting with someone and maybe you are chatting with me in class now, and I'm talking to you about probably upgrading your laptop computer system. You will notice that once you go to Facebook, the advertisements that suddenly start coming to you, you would see laptops, computer systems coming up. Have any of us experienced that before now? Yeah,
Yes,
Mr. Abel, yeah. So that has to
yes,
do
I've
with
experienced that.
data processing. And yet, the social media agents keep telling us that our data is safe and secure. They keep telling us that our data is encrypted. How sure are we? Because they are now introducing algorithms that shares our data amongst their apps. What did Facebook now do? Facebook now brought up a disclosure. Whenever you are installing WhatsApp, Facebook, or Instagram, of course, a lot of people don't get to read T and C. T and C means terms and condition. They just scroll down and click the install button. What Facebook put in there, they now have put in there that be aware that every information on our app will be shared among similar third-party apps. So by choosing to install this app, it means you consent to that. Now we are coming into artificial intelligence and automations. When we are designing AI systems, are we taking data ethics into concern? Are we accounting for data privacy when you are automating processes? Now I can decide to use one of these ChatGPT to build a model. What is the model doing? The model is to go across the social media and pick out data of people that are probably visiting a particular website. Are these people aware that by building an AI model, their data is being collected? That is why we are considering data ethics. In the world of today, it's generally known that about 2.5 core billion data is created daily worldwide. 4.8 million USD is the average cost spent on a data breach. When I taught my students in cybersecurity, we had a course called Information and Data Security just last semester. I showed them a video clip about the cost in terms of USD that happens when a data is breached. We talk about the Equifax data breach that has to do with credit cards being breached. And 79% of Americans, and now African is also getting very, very concerned about how data collected is getting used. Because several algorithm decisions now affects various credits, employment, bail, healthcare, college admissions. We go to now we see our banks. Every bank is collecting data. You go to the church now, church is collecting data. You go to the supermarket, they are collecting data. Any mobile app you install is collecting KYC, know your customer, collecting data. There should be a concern. How much of our data is safe and secure out there? What sort of preventive measure is being put in place for our data to be secure in a proper ethical pattern? Data breaches expose millions of records annually. Millions of records annually. Tech firms, they keep collecting our data at no scale. Why should that be going on? There must be a pillar that defines how our data is being collected. There must be a pillar that defines how our data is being used. A pillar that defines how transparent are the protection systems or the protections mechanisms they put in place for our data. That leads us to the core pillars of data ethics. The first one, privacy. Every individual have a right to control their personal data. Personal data of individuals collected must be minimal. I do tell my students, if I'm coming to take a survey, probably in this class we are now, I want to take a survey of satisfaction of students with the method I'm teaching. I'll ask myself, how much data do I need? Do I actually need your name? If I don't need your name to be in a survey form, why do I need to put it? Remember, the target is this, the focus is this: customer satisfaction on my method of teaching. Probably I'll create a field in the form saying, how satisfied are you with the teaching method? How satisfied are you with the facilities? How satisfied are you with timekeeping? How satisfied are you with the course delivery technique? Do I actually need your name? So, in general principle, I apply this principle and I always advise students: data or information not needed should not be collected. Why? If a breach occurs, if a breach occurs, lots of sensitive information would be exposed. And the cyber criminals, they usually concern themselves with organizations that pull out and get customer data on a daily basis. Data collection, I've said it, should be minimal, should be purposeful, and should be consensual. If I need your name for any reason in taking a survey form in this class, it should be that I want to attach your name to your response with a view of personally attending to you to help you understand my course better. That means that my purpose of performing the survey in class has changed. It has changed from just getting a general overview of my method of teaching. It has now changed to how well can I help you to understand this course. In that case, I now need your name. And if I need your name, I must put a disclaimer. By putting your name and your email, be rest assured that your information dwells with me. Or by me collecting your name and your email, be informed that I am going to share your data with the school management, informing them of what has transpired in the class. So I must put that disclaimer so that when you are filling the form, you could either decide to accept or to turn down that request of filling the form. Fairness. Systems that are being developed that has data as part of it must not discriminate or produce outcomes that disadvantage individuals based on protected characteristics. Let's take, for instance, gender. Gender. We have put out a survey, and the surveyor requesting for the gender of the people responding to your form. You must make sure that asking for the gender is not in any way to victimize against the people or the respondents in the form in your system you are being built. Asking for specific things shouldn't be with the intention of victimization. It should be probably to help fairness and equity. What do I mean? You are asking for the gender so that your responses would help you in probably proper planning for resource distribution, accountability. Those who collect and deploy data, they must be answerable for the outcomes. Outcomes may be positive or negative. Outcomes must not always be negative. They must be answerable for the outcomes of the data. If any harm comes into play, I must be responsible for saying, yes, I caused this harm because my system was hacked. Transparency. The logic of data systems should be explainable to everyone that is filling the data. Anybody that is filling your data form, anybody that is visiting your website, anybody that you are using for your analysis, they must know exactly what the data is to be used. You must explain it in clear terms, no ambiguity. I am using this data to analyze the per capita income of the city of Zimbabwe. I am using this data to analyze the religious level of my respondents to see how I can bring you spiritually to your supreme being. Very, very important. Ethics apply at every stage of the data journey. Ethics must apply at every stage. What do we mean? Right from when you are designing your data collection tool, what ethical principle must be attached there? Consent must be obtained. Please mark that. The ethical principle that must apply when collecting data is this: consent must be obtained. Data collection is different from data storage. For instance, you collect data. Where do you store the data? You store it on your cloud. Probably you're using Dropbox, you're using OneDrive, you're using Google Drive. How secure is your cloud? Do you use a random password How secure is your laptop where you store people's sensitive data? Do you have a password change policy that every month I must change the password every 3 months? Storage, the ethical principle of data in storage is that data must be secure. Processing. Why processing people's data in the case of analysis? Processing of data, the ethical principle is that fairness must be applied. Fairness must be applied. Now, very importantly, when sharing data, in cybersecurity, we have what is called DLP principle, data loss prevention principles. We have what is called data at rest, data in transit. Data at rest, data in transit. When sharing your data, who and who can have access? Generally, as a security specialist, this is the advice I generally usually give when it comes to movement of data. If you are sharing a file through email, let's assume you are sharing an Excel file that has salary details of your staff. If you are sharing it through email, I usually recommend, if that document is extra sensitive and private, password that document, password that Excel file, password that PDF, and share the password with the original intended owner of that mail. Why do I usually advise that? Remember this. Once you attach a document to a mail and you send it to me, I can as well forward that mail to another person. When I forward that mail, what's the implication? That attachment is as well forwarded. So what is your stopgap and your data ethical principle there? The password you give to that file now defines who has access to that particular file. The password you gave to that file defines who has access to that particular file, meaning that you have applied principle of ethics to sharing of data. Remember, we are still at the foundation of data ethics, and we have to understand it at the foundational level. Now, what is the next thing? Usage. The example I gave applies to usage of data because the data you are sending must match the purpose or the intended purpose of sending it. Now, very importantly, one mistake organizations usually make, we have what is called data disposal. Now, let's reason this together. For how long do you think you should retain people's sensitive data? For how long do we think you should retain people's sensitive data? Let's discuss this. You have gotten a survey form, maybe for a project, and people have filled the responses. You have probably done the project you needed. How long do you think you should retain sensitive data? Mr. Abel, can you give us your view? How long should you retain people's sensitive data?
Okay, well, I think, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think it depends. I'm thinking of if that data is collected for a specific project, um, that data could be kept for the life cycle of the project. If it's I remember I once worked on a 10-year project uh, on one of the education programs in Zimbabwe, and we're collecting a lot of data. We kept that data because for the entire life cycle of the project, for the entire duration, which was 10 years. How it was disposed, I cannot tell because I don't know. We just left it when we surrendered all the project assets and other things. Yeah. So I think for as long as the purpose for which that data is being collected is still uh, alive, I think is still ongoing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okelo, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Actually, I work with a number of organizations where they have, from the government side, I don't think so. They have plan just for discarding those things unless it's spoiled by himself because they will keep it there without checking it, and then difficult. Just if you touch those documents and then you want to remove them, it's very challenging from their side. But another organization that I work for, will depend on the nature of the data. Yes, because I work for a unit share. So when I work for a unit share, we have, we used to collect the data of refugee during the registration about their security, whatever, and then we will do it manually. Later on, we enter those data into this and into to the computer, and then the data that we left manually, we will not keep them for so long. Maybe within when we check everything within 2 year or 1 year, when we finish everything, we'll discard that one because this one manually will be more accessible for the unauthorized individual than the soft copy one because the soft copy one only is logged with the password and then no one can get there. So yeah, so what I'm saying will depend on the organization policy. Some organization even they have a policy for restoring. They know the benefit of of restoring the data, but they don't have a plan when those documents going to be discarded from the store.
Okay, thank
So this is
you.
what I'm suggesting. What yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so just like we have all said, we are all right. So organization must have a policy from the point where you decide, to collect data of people. You must have a policy as regarding data disposal. Such policy could be at the end of the project, do we discard of this data 6 months or 3 weeks after the project ends? Yes or no? Or do we keep maybe data that has to do with names, phone numbers? For how long do we keep such data? Or do we also decide data that has to do with maybe customer card details? When not needed, how long? Data that has to do with customer health records, how long do we keep such data? There must be a policy for every data we collect. When not needed, how long should we preserve it? Because data entering the wrong hand is usually a problem. Data entering the wrong hand is usually a problem waiting to happen. Now let's proceed. Ethics, like I said, must always be applied at every stage of the data life cycle. Like I said, only collect what you need. Use data only as declared and delete data when not needed. Now we now move forward to the frameworks. The frameworks surrounding data ethics. We have three different frameworks. Number one, we have the utilitarianism framework, we have the deontology framework, and we have the virtue ethics. In the utilitarianism framework, we ask a major question. What produces, it's a philosophical question anyway, what produces the greatest good for the greatest number? When applying it to data, we say justify data collection if societal benefit outweighs individual risks. That is, we are saying if we are aligning why we collect data against the risks, there will be two schools of thought. Don't collect data because hackers would hack into the database. But the government will say, I need this data to study, maybe we are collecting data that has to do with prevalence of a particular ailment in a city. So we want to get those data to see how a new drug could be produced. Data privacy antagonists will tell us, no, collecting this data, it will be apt because there's no proper data protection regulatory agency in the country. On the other hand, we'll say if we don't collect this data, how many lives will be lost before we now establish that data protection agency? What will now guide us? The question will now be, can we sacrifice minority rights for majority benefits? What do you think, please? What do you think? What do we think when we are collecting
You
data
are
using this framework?
are you asking us,
Yes,
Doctor?
yes. I'm asking. Using this framework when collecting data, do you think that we should sacrifice minority rights if the benefit outweighs the risk?
I
Yeah,
think,
this term with
okay, go ahead, Okello,
I
sorry.
think this, yeah, those ideology we say that you can sacrifice the minority right for the benefit of majority uh, is sometimes debatable because each individual have equal right with other people that you may thought that they are majority or whatever. So it is good that those individuals are voluntary to give themselves, to sacrifice themselves for the benefit of others. But if it's not their will, mean that you do something which is not right for them. So mean that you take the right away by force, just to implement whatever you want to do. But if you give them a consent, maybe they can be voluntary to accept what you said and then sacrifice themselves for the benefit of others. So thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Abel, any contrary view?
Yes, I think it's quite tricky for me, I think, because in some cases we could easily argue, even from an ethical point of view, that does the end justify the means, you know? But that doesn't take out the fact that there are situations like when we look at the COVID, the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, which was quite fatal, and which means the 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 consequences of not doing what the government felt obliged to do to preserve lives were dire, and to then think of going through the consent and a process. So in that case, I think the principle of double effect then comes to play, where whatever then harm ensues as a result of that may be permissible, but not intended. Yeah, that's what I think. So I think this is areas where I would think that it works on a case by case basis.
Okay. So we have someone else in the class. Olua. So please, are you with us? Would you love to contribute? Oluwadunsi, please, would you love to contribute? Okay, so let's proceed. So that is a thought for reflection because it's a very dicey situation. We recall when malaria came in to the African continent and the whites were trying to help us produce the drug. Issue of data privacy came up when it has to do with collection of samples, and the decision they took at that point was to sacrifice the minority rights for majority benefits. But now, when we look at the deontology framework, the law is clear. In the deontology framework, consent is required for data, period. Using the deontology framework, we say that privacy is a right and not a trade-off. Privacy is a right and not a trade-off. A debate was held among the Unitarianism group and the deontology group in a class where we lectured. We divided the students into two, one for this and one against it. And I must confess that that was a very, very interesting argument, because quite a lot of people were on the utilitarianism aspect and some on the ontology aspect. Some said benefit must outweigh the risks, and it was very interesting. But when we are using the ontology rule, we said consent is required, period. No arguments. No arguments. Now, when we are talking about the virtue ethics, applying it to data, we always say this: data specialists or data professionals must always employ and embody honesty, integrity, and responsibility. For instance, let me say this. Currently, I have several institutions I manage their data. By managing their data, it means that I have access to the forms filled by thousands and thousands of individuals. Will it be right? I suddenly want to run a campaign of maybe my product. I have a product I'm selling. Will it be right to, because I have access to that, I go and harvest their phone numbers or email and assume that they are my campaign targets, and I send emails to them to come and buy my product that will be beneficial to them? Do you think that would be right? Remember, my product will be beneficial to them. So do you think it is right that I just harvest the data and sell that information that will be useful to them? Do you think that would be right?
No, that should
Thank you
not be
very much.
right, because the purpose for which you got access to their data has got nothing to do with your product.
Exactly. If the school says send an email or a text to all the students inviting them for this XYZ, that is a different case. It does not in
Yes.
any way assume that, let's take for instance Osiri University. You want to now form a student union government. I'm the head of IT, having access to your emails. The school says send an email to students informing them that election will take place at so and so day. That does not give me the right to use that same email database and send an email to those same group of students informing them of a politician that is campaigning in that election. No, because the data is owned by the school. And the purpose of collecting this data is to disseminate information relating to the school and to be authorized by the head of the school. We must be guided by ethics. Now, this is where our lectures get interesting. We want to have a case study and study the Cambridge Analytica case. What is this about before we watch the video? Cambridge Analytica is an organization that harvested personal data from 87 million Facebook users via a third-party quiz app. Facebook, you can install apps. They just brought in a quiz app and harvested data of Facebook users without the explicit content. Now, they use that for political use. How was it used? The data they harvested was used to build psychographic profiles and they now use it to deliver targeted political advertising during the US election. What was the ethical violations? You only came to Facebook and told me to partake in a quiz. You know all these games that come up in social media? I have a Facebook account. I created an app, installed it on Facebook. I now came and partook in a quiz. By partaking in the quiz, I put in my name, my area of specialty, maybe my location. Now, I put it for a quiz. Cambridge Analytica now used it to send targeted campaigns relating to the election. The ethical violations was this: lack of informed content, limitation breach, deceptive data practices, and exploitation of personal information for political manipulation. Let's watch that video before we come back here.